Women whispered it in destroyed temples. They carved it into bathroom stalls. They wrote it in diaries they would later burn. The phrase that became their secret language, their warning, their shared wound. I can't sit without pain. Michiko Yamada pressed her forehead against the cold window of what remained of her classroom. Outside, American jeeps rolled through streets still dusted with ash from the fire bombings. Children waved small flags they'd been given. Adults bowed deeply, their faces masks of practiced submission. The occupation had begun with promises of democracy, reconstruction, and justice. That was 3 months ago. Now Michiko knew better. Her hands trembled as she gripped the windowsill. The bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow-green, but the memory remained sharp as broken glass. She had been one of the lucky ones, they said. She had survived. She could still walk, still work, still pretend that everything was normal. But at night, when she lay alone in her small room, she heard her sister's screams echoing through her mind. Screams that had stopped 2 weeks ago, when they found Ayumi's body in the river. The official report called it suicide. Depression from the war, they said. Trauma from the bombings. The American military police had been very sympathetic, very professional. They had even sent flowers to the funeral. White lilies that Michiko had thrown into the trash. She turned from the window and surveyed her empty classroom. The students hadn't come today. Their parents were keeping them home, especially the girls. Word traveled fast in the ruins of Tokyo, faster than official reports, faster than propaganda. The women knew. They always knew. A knock at the door made her jump. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she forced herself to breathe, to appear calm. It could be anyone. It could be nothing. The door opened slowly. A woman's face appeared, weathered and wise, with silver threading through her black hair. Tomoe Ishikawa stepped inside, closing the door carefully behind her. She carried a basket covered with cloth, the kind women used for shopping at the market. But Michiko knew there was no food inside. Yamada-sensei, Tomoe said quietly, using Michiko's teacher title with the old respect. We need to talk. Michiko nodded, gesturing to the small chairs meant for children. They sat, 2 grown women folding themselves into spaces designed for innocence. Tomoe placed the basket between them and pulled back the cloth. Inside were papers, dozens of them, covered in cramped handwriting, testimonies, stories, names and dates and details that made Michiko's stomach turn. There are 43 women in this district alone, Tomoe said, her voice steady despite the horror of her words. 43 that we know of. The real number is certainly higher. Many won't speak. Many can't. Michiko picked up one of the papers, her eyes scanning the words. A 17-year-old girl taken from her home. A widow assaulted while searching for food. A grandmother beaten when she tried to protect her granddaughter. The stories blurred together, a litany of violence that the official reports never mentioned. What are we supposed to do with this? Michiko asked, though she already knew the answer. She had known from the moment Tomoe walked through her door. Document it. Preserve it. Make sure the world knows. Tomoe leaned forward, her eyes intense. They're writing a different story, Yamada-sensei. In the newspapers, in the official reports, they're saying the occupation is peaceful, that we're being liberated, that democracy is coming to Japan. But we know the truth. We're living it. Michiko set the paper down carefully, as if it might shatter. If we do this, if we collect these stories, we become targets. You know that. We're already targets, Tomo replied. The only question is whether we'll be silent targets or whether we'll fight back the only way we can. With truth. The word hung in the air between them. Truth. Such a simple concept, yet so dangerous. Michiko thought of her sister, of the official report that erased her suffering, that turned her murder into a statistic of post-war depression. She thought of all the other women whose stories were being buried under propaganda and official silence. There's a journalist, Tomo continued. Young woman named Akane Fujimoto. She works at the Asahi Shimbun, but she's been trying to report the real stories. Her editors won't publish them, of course. Too controversial, too dangerous. But she's been keeping records, taking photographs when she can. She wants to meet with us. And then what? Michiko asked. Even if we document everything, even if we have proof, who will listen? The Americans control the press. They control everything. Tomo smiled, a thin, determined expression. Not everything. There are foreign correspondents, journalists from other countries. If we can get the evidence to them, if we can make enough noise, maybe someone will pay attention. Maybe someone will care. It was a desperate plan, built on maybes and hopes. But it was something. It was more than silence. When do we meet her? Michiko asked. Tonight, at my tea house. Come after dark. Use the back entrance. Tomo stood covering the basket again. And Yamada-sensei? Bring anything you have. Any evidence, any testimony. We need everything. After Tomo left, Michiko sat alone in the classroom for a long time. The autumn sun slanted through the broken windows, casting long shadows across the floor. She thought about her sister, about the life Ayumi should have had. She thought about all the women suffering in silence, their pain dismissed, their stories erased. Then she went to her small apartment and retrieved the diary she had hidden beneath the floorboards. Ayumi's diary, the one the military police had never found, the one that detailed everything that had happened to her in those final weeks. Michiko had read it once, then hidden it away, unable to bear the weight of her sister's words. Now she would share those words with the world. Night fell over Tokyo like a curtain, bringing with it the illusion of safety. Michiko moved through the darkened streets, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the main roads where American patrols drove their jeeps. The tea house was in the old district, one of the few buildings that had survived the fire bombings relatively intact. Its traditional architecture stood out among the ruins, a ghost of what Tokyo had been. She found the back entrance as instructed, a narrow door hidden behind a screen of bamboo. She knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 times. The signal Tomo had taught her. The door opened immediately. A young woman stood there, barely visible in the darkness. She was small and slight, with intelligent eyes that assessed Michiko quickly before stepping aside to let her enter. Yamada-sensei? The woman whispered. I'm Akane Fujimoto. Inside, the tea house was dimly lit by paper lanterns. The main room had been converted into something between a meeting space and a war room. Maps covered one wall, marked with pins and notations. Photographs were spread across a low table, images that made Michiko's breath catch. Women with bruised faces, destroyed homes, bodies covered with sheets. Tomoe was there, along with 3 other women Michiko recognized from the neighborhood. They sat in a circle, their faces grave, their postures tense. This was no tea ceremony. This was a council of war. Thank you for coming, Tomoe said, gesturing for Michiko to sit. We're all taking a risk being here. But we've decided the risk of silence is greater. Michiko settled onto a cushion, placing Ayumi's diary in front of her. The other women's eyes were drawn to it immediately, recognizing it for what it was. Evidence, testimony, truth. Akane moved to sit beside Michiko, pulling out a notebook and a camera. I need to explain what we're trying to do, she said, her voice low but clear. The occupation authorities have established strict censorship. Any criticism of American forces is forbidden. Any reporting on what they call incidents is suppressed. The Japanese press is completely controlled. So how do we get the truth out? One of the other women asked. Her name was Reiko, Michiko remembered. A nurse at one of the makeshift hospitals. Foreign correspondents, Akane replied. There are journalists from other countries here observing the occupation. They're not under the same restrictions. If we can get evidence to them, if we can make them care about what's happening, they might report it to the world. Might, another woman said bitterly. That's a lot of risk for might. It's all we have, Tomo said firmly. Unless you have a better idea, Sachiko. Sachiko, a former geisha who now ran a small restaurant, shook her head. No, I just want everyone to understand what we're risking. If we're caught, if they find out what we're doing, it won't just be us who suffer. Our families, our friends, anyone connected to us. The weight of that truth settled over the room. Michiko thought of her parents, already devastated by Ayumi's death. What would happen to them if she was arrested? If she disappeared? But then she thought of her sister's words written in careful characters in the diary before her. She thought of all the other women who had no voice, no advocate, no hope of justice. She thought of the official reports that erased their suffering, that turned their pain into propaganda about peaceful occupation and grateful liberation. I have my sister's diary, Michiko said, breaking the silence. She documented everything that happened to her. Names, dates, locations, everything. Akane's eyes widened. May I? She asked, gesturing to the diary. Michiko handed it over. watching as Akane carefully opened it and began to read. The journalist's face remained professionally neutral, but Michiko saw her hands tighten on the pages, saw the muscle jump in her jaw. "This is detailed," Akane said finally. "Very detailed. With this, with the other testimonies we've collected, we have a case. We have proof. Proof that will be dismissed as lies," Reiko said. "You know how this works. They'll say we're making it up, that we're bitter about losing the war, that we're trying to make the Americans look bad. That's why we need more than just written testimony," Akane replied. "We need photographs, medical records, anything that can't be easily dismissed. Reiko, you work at the hospital. Can you access records?" The nurse hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Some. The doctors have been documenting injuries, but they're careful about what they write in the official reports. There are private notes, though. Records they keep separate. Can you get copies?" "Maybe. It would be dangerous." "Everything we're doing is dangerous," Tomo said. "The question is whether the danger is worth it." They talked for hours, planning and strategizing. Akane explained her contacts with foreign correspondents, particularly a British journalist named Margaret Chen, who had been asking questions about the occupation. Reiko described the medical evidence she might be able to obtain. Sachiko offered her restaurant as another meeting place, somewhere less obvious than the tea house. And Michiko listened, feeling something she hadn't felt since before Ayumi's death. Purpose, direction, a reason to keep going beyond simple survival. "There's something else we need to consider," Akane said as the meeting was winding down. "Not all the Americans are the same. There are soldiers who are horrified by what's happening. Some have tried to report it through official channels and been silenced. If we could find one willing to help us, willing to provide testimony from inside the military, it would strengthen our case enormously." "You're talking about finding a traitor," Sachiko said. "An American willing to betray his own people." "I'm talking about finding someone with a conscience," Akane corrected. "Someone who believes in the principles America claims to stand for. Justice, freedom, human rights. Those principles mean nothing if they only apply to Americans." It was a compelling argument, but Michiko couldn't help her skepticism. After everything she'd seen, everything she'd experienced, the idea of an American soldier with a conscience seemed like a fairy tale. But she kept her doubts to herself. They needed hope even if it was fragile. The meeting ended with assignments. Reiko would work on obtaining medical records. Sachiko would use her connections in the entertainment district to gather more testimonies. Tomoe would continue to coordinate, using the tea house as a hub. Akane would make contact with the foreign correspondents, and Michiko would work on compiling and organizing the testimonies they collected, turning individual stories into a comprehensive record. As they prepared to leave, slipping out one by one to avoid suspicion, Akane pulled Michiko aside. "Your sister's diary," she said quietly. "It's powerful. It's exactly the kind of detailed personal account that can make people understand what's really happening. But I need to ask, are you sure you want to share it? Once it's out there, once people read it, you can't take it back. Her story becomes public." Michiko looked at the diary in Akane's hands. She thought about Ayumi, about the vibrant, hopeful girl she had been before the occupation. She thought about the broken, terrified woman she had become. She thought about the lies in the official report, the erasure of her suffering. "She deserves to be heard," Michiko said. "Even if it's too late to save her, she deserves to have her truth told." Akane nodded, carefully placing the diary in her bag. "I'll protect it with my life," she promised. Michiko believed her. The next few weeks passed in a blur of secret meetings and careful documentation. Michiko threw herself into the work, spending her days teaching the few students who still came to class and her nights organizing testimonies. The stories piled up, each one a small piece of a larger horror. A pattern emerged, one that couldn't be dismissed as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. The violence was systematic, it was protected, and it was being deliberately hidden. Reiko managed to obtain copies of medical records, smuggling them out of the hospital in her nurse's bag. The documents were clinical, detached, but the injuries they described told their own story. Trauma consistent with sexual assault, defensive wounds, fractures from beatings. The doctors had documented everything, even as the official reports claimed there were no problems. Sachiko brought testimonies from women in the entertainment district, women who had been forced into prostitution to survive, women who had no choice but to serve the occupying forces. Their stories were particularly harrowing, filled with details of systematic exploitation and abuse. And Akane worked her contacts, carefully feeling out which foreign correspondents might be sympathetic, which ones might be willing to risk their access to report the truth. It was delicate work, dangerous work. One wrong word to the wrong person, and they could all be arrested. Through it all, Michiko kept thinking about what Akane had said, about finding an American soldier willing to help them. It seemed impossible, but she couldn't shake the idea. They needed someone from inside, someone who could corroborate their evidence, someone who could prove that the cover-up went all the way to the top. The answer came from an unexpected source. It was a cold November evening when Michiko was walking home from the tea house, her bag heavy with documents. She was tired, distracted, not paying enough attention to her surroundings. She didn't notice the man following her until he called out, Miss, wait." She froze, her heart hammering. The voice was American, the accent unmistakable. She turned slowly, preparing to run, preparing to scream. The man who stood behind her was young, maybe 25, with sandy hair and troubled eyes. He wore an American uniform, corporal stripes on his sleeve. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quickly. "I just need to talk to you. Please." Every instinct told Michiko to run, but something in his face, in his voice, made her hesitate. He looked scared. He looked guilty. "What do you want?" she asked, her English careful and precise. "I know what you're doing," he said, glancing around nervously. "I know you're collecting testimonies, documenting what's happening. I want to help." Michiko's blood ran cold. If he knew, if the military knew, they were all in danger. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, starting to back away. "Wait, please." He stepped forward, then stopped when she flinched. "My name is William Brennan. I'm a corporal in the 1st Cavalry Division, and I've seen things, terrible things, that I can't stay silent about anymore. Why are you telling me this?" Michiko demanded. "Why not report it through your own channels?" His laugh was bitter. "I tried. I filed reports. I went to my commanding officer. You know what happened? Nothing. Worse than nothing. I was told to keep my mouth shut, that I was damaging morale, that I was being disloyal. They threatened to court-martial me if I kept pushing." Michiko studied him carefully. He could be lying. He could be a plant, sent to infiltrate their group. But his desperation seemed genuine, and the details he mentioned, the frustration with official channels, matched what Akane had predicted. "Even if what you're saying is true," Michiko said slowly, "why should I trust you? Why should any of us trust you?" "Because I have evidence," Brennan replied. "Official documents, reports that were filed and then buried, orders that came down from command to suppress investigations. I've been copying everything I can get my hands on. I have names, dates, locations. Everything you need to prove this goes all the way to the top. It was exactly what they needed. It was also exactly what someone would offer if they were trying to trap them." "I need to think about this," Michiko said. "I need to talk to others." "I understand," Brennan said. "But please, don't take too long. Things are getting worse. There's a new policy coming down, something about establishing recreation facilities. It sounds official and proper, but I've seen the plans. They're going to institutionalize this, make it systematic. We're running out of time." He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and held it out. "This is where I'm stationed. If you decide to trust me, leave a message with the cleaning woman who works there. Her name is Hana. Tell her you're looking for your cousin. She'll get word to me." Michiko took the paper, not sure if she was making a terrible mistake. Brennan nodded once, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. She stood there for a long moment, her mind racing. Then she hurried home, the paper burning in her pocket like evidence of treason. The next meeting at the tea house was tense. Michiko explained her encounter with Brennan, watching the reactions of the other women carefully. Skepticism, fear, and underneath it all, a desperate hope. "It could be a trap," Reiko said immediately. "They could be trying to identify all of us to shut us down. Or he could be genuine," Akane countered. "We knew we needed someone from inside. This could be our chance." "It's too convenient," Sachiko argued. "He just happens to approach Yamada-sensei. He just happens to have exactly what we need. It smells like a setup." Tomoe had been quiet, listening to the debate. Now she spoke, her voice thoughtful. There's a way to test him. We give him something small, something that won't compromise us if he's lying. We see what he does with it. If he's genuine, he'll prove it. If he's a plant, we'll know. And if we're wrong? Reiko asked. If we misjudge and he exposes us? Then we're no worse off than we would be eventually, Tomo replied. They're going to find us eventually anyway. The question is whether we accomplish something before they do. It was a grim assessment, but accurate. They all knew their work had a time limit. The only question was whether they could get the truth out before they were silenced. I'll make contact, Michiko said. I'll set up a meeting. But we do it carefully in a public place. Somewhere we can watch him. Somewhere we can run if we need to. They spent the next hour planning, working out every detail. The meeting would be at Sachiko's restaurant, during the lunch rush when there would be plenty of people around. Michiko would go alone initially, but the others would be nearby, watching. If anything seemed wrong, if Brennan brought anyone with him or if military police showed up, they would scatter and disappear. It took 3 days to arrange. Michiko left the message with Hana, the cleaning woman Brennan had mentioned. The woman's face had remained carefully neutral, but she had nodded once, a tiny gesture of acknowledgement. 2 days later, Hana slipped Michiko a note confirming the meeting time and place. The restaurant was crowded when Michiko arrived, filled with workers on their lunch break. She spotted Brennan immediately sitting alone at a corner table, his uniform drawing curious glances from the other patrons. He looked nervous, his eyes constantly scanning the room. Michiko sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. You came, she said. I said I would, Brennan replied. Did you think I wouldn't? I didn't know what to think, Michiko admitted. I still don't. He nodded, understanding. I brought something, he said, sliding a folder across the table. It's not everything, but it's a start. Incident reports from the past 3 months. Official reports that were filed and then classified. You'll see the pattern. Michiko opened the folder carefully, her eyes scanning the documents inside. They were military forms, typed and stamped with official seals. Incident reports, just as Brennan had said, but the details had been redacted, blacked out with heavy ink. Only the dates and locations remained visible. This doesn't tell us much, Michiko said, disappointed. Look at the pattern, Brennan urged. Look at how many reports there are, how frequently they occur. Now look at what the official press releases say. 0 incidents, perfect behavior, complete cooperation, the numbers don't match. He was right. Even with the details redacted, the sheer volume of reports told a story. Something was happening, something significant enough to generate dozens of official reports, and yet the public narrative claimed everything was peaceful. This proves there's a cover-up, Michiko said slowly, but it doesn't prove what's being covered up. I know, Brennan said. That's why I need your help. I have access to the files, but I can't get to the unredacted versions. They're kept in the command office, under lock and key. But I know when the office is empty, when the guards change shifts. If I could get in there, if I could photograph the real reports, we'd have everything we need. It was a dangerous proposal. If Brennan was caught, he'd be court-martialed. If Michiko and the others were implicated, they'd be arrested. But it was also an opportunity they might never get again. I need to discuss this with the others, Michiko said. This isn't a decision I can make alone. I understand, Brennan said. But please decide quickly. The window of opportunity is small. There's an inspection coming in 2 weeks. Before that happens, they're going to purge the files, destroy anything that could be embarrassing. If we're going to do this, it has to be soon. They talked for a few more minutes, working out details of how to communicate, how to coordinate if they decided to move forward. Then Brennan left, slipping out of the restaurant and disappearing into the crowd. Michiko sat alone for a moment, the folder of redacted reports in front of her. Then she signaled to Sachiko, who had been watching from behind the counter. The other women emerged from their hiding places, converging on the table. Well, Tomoe asked, what do you think? I think he's either the bravest man I've ever met or the best liar, Michiko replied. And I'm not sure which scares me more. They debated for hours, weighing risks against potential rewards. The documents Brennan offered could be the smoking gun they needed, the proof that would make their case undeniable. But the risk of obtaining them was enormous. In the end, it was Akane who made the decisive argument. "We're not going to get another chance like this," she said. "If we don't act now, if we let fear stop us, then everything we've done so far is meaningless. The testimonies, the medical records, all of it can be dismissed without corroboration from inside the military. This is our chance to get that corroboration." "And if it's a trap?" Reiko asked. "Then we spring it knowing we tried," Akane replied. "I'd rather take the risk and fail than live with the knowledge that we were too afraid to act." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Even Reiko, despite her reservations, acknowledged that they had to try. "I'll coordinate with Brennan," Michiko said. "We'll plan this carefully, with contingencies and escape routes. And if anything feels wrong, if there's any sign of a trap, we abort immediately." The planning took a week. Brennan provided detailed information about the command office, including floor plans and guard schedules. He identified a night when the office would be minimally staffed, when he could create a distraction that would give him access to the files. He would photograph everything he could, then get the film to Michiko. The night of the operation, Michiko waited in a small park near the military compound, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Tomoe was with her, silent and steady. The other women were scattered around the area, ready to create diversions if needed, ready to run if things went wrong. The minutes crawled by. Every sound made Michiko jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. She checked her watch obsessively, counting down the seconds until Brennan was supposed to appear. He was late. 5 minutes past the agreed time. Then 10. Then 15. "Something's wrong," Tomo whispered. "We should go." But before they could move, a figure stumbled out of the darkness. Brennan, his face bloody, his uniform torn. He collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. Michiko and Tomoe rushed to him, supporting his weight. "What happened?" Michiko demanded. "Got the photos?" Brennan gasped, pressing a small canister of film into her hands. "But someone saw me. Raised the alarm. I had to fight my way out." "Did they follow you?" Tomo asked urgently. "I don't think so. I lost them in the streets. But they know someone broke into the office. They'll be looking." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Military police, searching for the intruder. "We need to get him out of here," Michiko said. "If they find him like this, they'll know he was involved." They half-carried, half-dragged Brennan through the back streets, avoiding the main roads where patrols were searching. Tomo led them to the tea house, which had a hidden room beneath the main floor, a space that had once been used to hide valuables during the war. They got Brennan inside and down into the hidden room just as military vehicles roared past outside. The women held their breath, listening to the sounds of searching, of doors being kicked in, of angry voices demanding information. But the tea house was passed over. The soldiers moved on, searching elsewhere. In the hidden room, Reiko tended to Brennan's injuries while Michiko examined the film canister. It was intact, undamaged, despite the chaos of Brennan's escape. Inside was the evidence they needed, the proof that could change everything. "Was it worth it?" Brennan asked, wincing as Reiko cleaned a cut on his forehead. "Did I get enough?" "We won't know until we develop the film," Akane said. She had arrived shortly after they got Brennan inside, summoned by one of the other women. "But if you got what you said you could? If these are the unredacted reports, then yes, it was worth it." They kept Brennan hidden for 3 days while the military police searched for the intruder. During that time, Akane worked on developing the film, using chemicals and equipment she had borrowed from the newspaper. The process was painstaking, done in complete darkness, with only a dim red light to work by. When she finally emerged with the developed photographs, her face was grim. "It's worse than we thought," she said, spreading the images across the table. "Much worse." The photographs showed document after document, each one detailing incidents that had been officially denied. Assaults, rapes, murders, names of victims and perpetrators, dates and locations, and most damning of all, orders from high-ranking officers to suppress investigations, to intimidate witnesses, to cover up the crimes. "This is systematic," Tomo said, her voice shaking with rage. "This isn't a few bad soldiers, this is policy." "Look at this one," Reiko said, pointing to a particular document. "It's an order establishing what they call recreation and amusement centers. They're brothels. Official brothels sanctioned by the Occupation Command. They're forcing women into prostitution and calling it recreation." The room fell silent as the full horror of what they were seeing sank in. This wasn't just about individual crimes. This was about an entire system designed to exploit and abuse Japanese women. A system that went all the way to the top of the occupation command. "We need to get this to the foreign correspondents," Akane said. "Now. Before they realize what we have. Before they can stop us. I've already made contact with Margaret Chen," Akane continued. "The British journalist I mentioned. She's agreed to meet with us, to look at our evidence. But she wants to meet somewhere secure, somewhere the military police won't be watching." "When?" Michiko asked. "Tomorrow night. There's an old shrine on the outskirts of the city, mostly destroyed but still standing. She'll meet us there at midnight." It was risky, meeting in such an isolated location, but they had run out of safe options. The military police were still searching for the person who had broken into the command office. Sooner or later, they would connect Brennan's disappearance to the break-in. They were running out of time. The next night, Michiko, Akane, and Tomoe made their way to the shrine, carrying copies of the documents and photographs. They had left the originals hidden in multiple locations, insurance against disaster. If something happened to them, if they were arrested or killed, the evidence would still exist. The shrine was a ruin. Its main building collapsed, its torii gate leaning at a dangerous angle. But in the moonlight it still held a kind of beauty, a reminder of what had been lost. Margaret Chen was waiting for them, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She was accompanied by another journalist, an American man named David Foster who worked for a small independent newspaper. "You're taking a hell of a risk meeting with us," Chen said without preamble. "I hope you have something worth it." Akane handed over the documents and photographs. Chen and Foster examined them by flashlight, their expressions growing increasingly serious as they read. "Jesus Christ," Foster muttered. "This is explosive. If this gets out, if people back home see this, it could change everything." "That's what we're hoping," Michiko said. "We want the world to know what's really happening here. We want justice." Chen looked up from the documents, her eyes hard. "You understand that publishing this will make you targets, right? The military will come after you. They'll try to discredit you, to silence you. They might even try to kill you." "They're already trying to silence us," Tomo replied. "At least this way. We'll have spoken first." Chen nodded slowly. "All right, I'll write the story. Foster will back me up with his own reporting. We'll get this out to as many outlets as we can. But I need you to understand something. This is going to take time. We need to verify everything to make sure our sources are solid. We can't just publish accusations. We need proof that will stand up to scrutiny." "How much time?" Akane asked. "A few weeks. Maybe a month. We need to be thorough." A month. It seemed like an eternity. Anything could happen in a month. But they had no choice. This was their best chance. Perhaps their only chance. "There's something else," Brennan said. He had insisted on coming despite his injuries, despite the risk. "There's going to be a meeting next week. High-ranking officers from all the occupation zones. They're going to discuss the recreation and amusement program, finalize the details. If you could get someone inside that meeting, if you could record what they say, it would be undeniable proof." "How would we get someone inside?" Michiko asked. "It's a military meeting. They're not going to let Japanese civilians attend." "No," Brennan agreed. "But they will have Japanese staff, translators, servers, cleaning crew. If one of you could get hired for that detail, you might be able to hear what's said, maybe even take notes." It was dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous thing they had attempted yet. But the potential payoff was enormous. Direct testimony of high-ranking officers discussing the exploitation of Japanese women, recorded in their own words. "I'll do it," Michiko said before she could think better of it. "I speak English well enough to work as a translator. I can get inside." The others started to protest, but Michiko cut them off. "It has to be me. I'm a teacher. I have credentials. I have a reason to speak English. And I have the most motivation. They killed my sister. I want to look them in the eye when I expose what they've done." There was a long silence. Then Tomo nodded. "We'll support you however we can. But Yamada-sensei, please be careful. We've already lost too many women. I don't want to lose you too." The next week was a flurry of preparation. Brennan used his connections to get Michiko hired as a translator for the meeting. It required forged documents and careful lies, but somehow they managed it. Michiko would be one of several translators present. there to facilitate communication between American officers and their Japanese counterparts. She would also be there to bear witness. The day of the meeting, Michiko dressed carefully in her most professional clothes. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked calm, composed, professional. She didn't look like someone planning to commit what the military would consider espionage. The meeting was held in a commandeered hotel, one of the few buildings in Tokyo that had survived the fire bombings intact. Military police were everywhere, checking credentials, searching bags. Michiko's heart hammered as she presented her forged documents, certain they would be discovered. But the guard barely glanced at them before waving her through. Inside, the hotel had been converted into a military headquarters. American flags hung on the walls. Officers in crisp uniforms strode through the halls with the confidence of conquerors. Michiko kept her eyes down, playing the role of the subservient translator, invisible and unthreatening. The meeting room was large, dominated by a long table. High-ranking officers were already gathering, talking in low voices. Michiko took her place with the other translators, trying to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. She had a small notebook hidden in her sleeve, and a pencil tucked into her hair. If she could take notes, if she could record what was said, it would be invaluable evidence. The meeting began with routine business, discussions of supply lines and troop deployments. Michiko translated mechanically, her mind focused on waiting for the right moment. Then the topic shifted. "Gentlemen, we need to discuss the morale situation," a colonel said. His name was Whitmore, and he had the bearing of a career military man. "We've had increasing incidents of soldiers engaging in unauthorized fraternization with local women. It's becoming a discipline problem." "Unauthorized fraternization?" another officer said with a snort. "Is that what we're calling it now?" There was laughter around the table, cruel and knowing. Michiko's hands clenched, but she kept her face neutral. "The point is," Whitmore continued, "we need to address this in a systematic way. The Recreation and Amusement Association was a good start, but we need to expand it, make it official policy." "You're talking about military-sanctioned brothels," a younger officer said, his voice uncertain. "Isn't that against regulations?" "We're calling them recreation centers," Whitmore replied smoothly. "Places where soldiers can relax, socialize, and yes, engage with local women in a controlled environment. It's better than having them running wild in the streets." "And the women?" the young officer asked. "Where do they come from?" "Volunteers," another officer said, his tone making it clear what he thought of that word. "Women who need money, who need food, who need protection. We're providing them with opportunities." Michiko wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and tell them exactly what their opportunities meant. But she stayed silent, her pencil moving across the notebook hidden in her lap, recording every word. The discussion continued, growing more explicit. They talked about quotas, about how many women would be needed for each facility. They talked about medical inspections, about keeping the women clean for the soldiers. They talked about it all with the casual efficiency of men planning a supply operation, not discussing human beings. "What about the ones who refuse?" someone asked. "The ones who won't volunteer?" There was a pause. Then Whitmore spoke, his voice cold. "We make it clear that cooperation is in their best interest, their family's best interest. Most of them come around once they understand the situation. Coercion, threats, extortion, all dressed up in bureaucratic language, but the meaning was clear." Michiko's hand shook as she wrote, but she forced herself to keep going. Every word was evidence. Every casual admission of exploitation was another nail in their coffin. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Michiko had filled her notebook with testimony that would damn the occupation command. She had names, dates, specific policies. She had everything they needed. Now she just had to get out alive. As the meeting broke up, Michiko gathered her things, trying to appear calm. She was almost to the door when a hand fell on her shoulder. "Miss Yamada?" She turned to find Major Douglas Hartwell standing behind her. He was a tall man with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Michiko had seen his name in the documents Brennan had stolen. He was one of the worst, responsible for covering up dozens of incidents. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady despite her terror. "I noticed you taking notes during the meeting," Hartwell said. "Very thorough. May I see them?" Michiko's mind raced. If he saw what she had written, if he realized she had recorded everything, she was dead. But if she refused, that would be suspicious too. "Of course, sir," she said, reaching for the official notebook she had been given, the one with innocuous translation notes. "Here you are." Hartwell flipped through it, his eyes scanning the pages. Michiko held her breath, praying he wouldn't notice the other notebook, the one still hidden in her sleeve. "Very good," Hartwell said finally, handing it back. "You're quite skilled. We'll have to request you for future meetings." "Thank you, sir," Michiko said, bowing slightly. She walked out of the hotel on shaking legs, certain at any moment someone would call her back, would discover what she had done. But no one stopped her. She made it to the street, into the crowd, and finally allowed herself to breathe. She had done it. She had the evidence they needed. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. The next few days were a blur of activity. Michiko transcribed her notes, creating multiple copies that were hidden in different locations. Akane passed the information to Margaret Chen and David Foster, who were working frantically to verify and prepare their story. Brennan, still in hiding, provided additional context and corroboration. They were close. So close to exposing the truth, but they weren't the only ones working frantically. The military police had intensified their search for the person who had broken into the command office. They were questioning soldiers, investigating anyone who had shown sympathy for the Japanese. It was only a matter of time before they connected the dots to Brennan. And through Brennan, to all of them, the warning came from an unexpected source. Hana, the cleaning woman who had been their messenger, appeared at the tea house one evening, her face pale with fear. "They're coming," she said without preamble. "The military police, they know about the tea house, about the meeting, someone talked." "When?" Tomo demanded. "Tonight. Maybe tomorrow. I don't know exactly, but soon." They had run out of time. "We need to scatter," Akane said. "Hide the evidence, destroy anything that could connect us. We can't let them find the documents." "What about the story?" Michiko asked. "Chen and Foster, are they ready to publish?" "Not yet," Akane admitted. "They need more time." "We don't have more time," Reiko said. "If we're arrested, if we disappear, the story dies with us." They looked at each other, the weight of the situation settling over them. They had come so far, risked so much, but it might not be enough. "There's one option," Brennan said. He had been quiet, listening to the discussion. Now he spoke up, his voice grim. "I turn myself in. I confess to breaking into the command office. I tell them I was acting alone, that I was troubled by what I saw and wanted to expose it. I take all the blame." "They'll court-martial you," Michiko said. "They might execute you." "Probably," Brennan agreed, "but it will buy you time. If they think they've caught the person responsible, they'll stop looking. You'll have a chance to finish what we started." "No," Akane said firmly. "We're not sacrificing you. There has to be another way." But as they talked through the options, it became clear that there wasn't. Someone had to take the fall, had to draw the military police's attention away from the others. And Brennan was the logical choice. He was already a suspect. His confession would be believable. "I'm doing this," Brennan said. "Not because I'm a hero, but because it's the right thing to do. Because I can't live with myself if I don't. You all have been so brave, risking everything to expose the truth. The least I can do is give you the time you need to finish." There were tears, arguments, desperate attempts to find another solution. But in the end, they all knew Brennan was right. He turned himself in the next morning, walking into military police headquarters and confessing to breaking into the command office. He claimed he had been acting alone, motivated by conscience. He refused to name any accomplices, insisted he had worked without help. They arrested him immediately. The news spread quickly. The military police announced they had caught the intruder, that the case was closed. The search operation stopped. The pressure eased. And in that breathing space, Margaret Chen and David Foster finished their story. It was published 3 weeks later, simultaneously in newspapers across Britain, Australia, and several neutral countries. The headline was stark: "Systematic Abuse. The Hidden Truth of the Japanese Occupation." The story laid out everything. The testimonies from dozens of women, the medical records documenting injuries, the photographs of official documents showing the cover-up, and most damning of all, Michiko's notes from the meeting. showing high-ranking officers casually discussing the exploitation of Japanese women as if it were routine military business. The reaction was immediate and explosive. In Britain, members of parliament demanded investigations. In Australia, veterans groups called for accountability. In America, where the military had managed to suppress most coverage, independent newspapers picked up the story, forcing the mainstream press to acknowledge it. The Occupation Command issued denials, called the story propaganda, claimed the documents were forged. But the evidence was too strong, too detailed, too corroborated. Other journalists began investigating, finding their own sources, uncovering their own evidence. The truth, once released, could not be contained. For Michiko and the others, the publication brought both vindication and danger. They were heroes to some, traitors to others. The military police wanted to arrest them, but the international attention made that difficult. They couldn't simply disappear women who had become symbols of resistance, but they could make their lives difficult. Michiko lost her teaching position. Tomoe's tea house was shut down on spurious health violations. Reiko was fired from the hospital. Sachiko's restaurant was vandalized repeatedly. They were harassed, followed, threatened, but they survived. And slowly, painfully, things began to change. The Recreation and Amusement Association was officially disbanded. New regulations were put in place to investigate complaints of abuse. Officers who had been implicated in the cover-up were quietly reassigned. It wasn't justice, not really. Most of the perpetrators faced no consequences. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that what had happened was wrong. Brennan was court-martialed and sentenced to 10 years in military prison. But the international attention on his case meant he wasn't forgotten. Advocacy groups took up his cause, arguing that he was a whistleblower, not a criminal. After 2 years, under pressure from multiple governments, he was released and dishonorably discharged. He returned to America a broken man, but alive. Years later, when the occupation finally ended, when Japan regained its sovereignty, Michiko stood in the rebuilt shrine where they had met Margaret Chen. She thought about everything they had sacrificed, everything they had lost. Her sister, her career, years of her life spent in fear and struggle. But she also thought about the women they had helped, the ones who had been able to escape because of their work. She thought about the truth they had exposed, the lies they had shattered. She thought about how their resistance, small and desperate as it had made a difference. Tomoe joined her, older now, her hair completely silver. "Do you think it was worth it?" she asked. Michiko considered the question. She thought about Ayumi, about the diary that had started everything. She thought about all the women whose stories they had preserved, whose suffering they had documented. She thought about the price they had paid and the changes they had forced. "Yes," she said finally, "it was worth it. Not because we won, not because we got justice, but because we refused to be silent, because we made them acknowledge what they had done, because we proved that even in the darkest times, even when you have no power, you can still resist. You can still fight for truth." Tomoe nodded, a small smile on her weathered face. "Ayumi would be proud of you. She would be proud of all of us," Michiko corrected. They stood together in the shrine, two old women who had once been young and terrified and brave. Around them, Tokyo was rebuilding, rising from the ashes of war. The occupation was over. A new era was beginning. But they would never forget. They would carry the memories, the stories, the truth. They would make sure that what had happened was not erased, not forgotten, not dismissed, because that was the final act of resistance. To remember, to bear witness, to ensure that the women who had suffered, who had died, who had been silenced would not be forgotten. Their pain had meaning. Their stories mattered, and as long as someone remembered, as long as someone told the truth, they had not suffered in vain. The sun set over Tokyo, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Michiko and Tomoe walked home together, two survivors in a world that had tried to break them but had failed. They had endured. They had resisted. They had won, not a complete victory, but something more important. They had preserved the truth, and in the end, that was everything. If this story made you think, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next deep dive into hidden history. Already subscribed? Smash that like button to help this reach more people, and drop a comment below. What other untold stories should we cover next? Your engagement shapes what we explore. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.